Hello, everyone, and welcome to my final project for Social Structure in Sport for the spring 2024 semester. For my final project, I will be debating the role of sport in society. So this semester, we are presented with two quotes, one from Nelson Mandela, the other from George Orwell. Mandela's quote argued that sport is good for society, while Orwell argued that sport does more harm than it does good. Orwell's quote states that serious sport has nothing to do with fair play. It is bound up with hatred, jealousy, boastfulness, disregard of all rules, and sadistic pleasure in witnessing violence. In other words, it is war minus the shooting. So this is the quote that I agree with, and I will be using to argue my points as to why sport does more bad than good for society. So the first reason is through the theory of meritocracy. And so meritocracy refers to a social system in which success and talent are dependent almost exclusively on individual talents, work effort, and ability. But the problem with meritocracy is that it is a philosophy that does not entirely hold up, since there are still wealth disparities that remain widespread throughout society. For example, one of the readings we did during the semester found during the 2018-19 school year, the number of kids participating in high school sports declined for the first time in 3 decades. The article also stated that children of high-income families are participating in sports more than ever, and that kids from homes earning more than $100,000 are now twice as likely to play a team sport at least once a day as kids from families earning less than $25,000. There's also the fact that colleges are giving out millions of dollars in scholarships, which is not helping children from poor families who can't afford college. Therefore, the theory of meritocracy is showing that children of low-income families are being denied the ability to participate in sports and reap the benefits of sport and physical activity for children. So next, I'm going to discuss the theory of social reproduction. So social reproduction refers to the mental, manual, and emotional labor required to produce the commodity labor power. And so it is argued that high performance and professional sports exploit athletes and reinforce the legitimacy of capitalism for spectators, and that athletes' bodies become appointed by fans and owners as a site of reproduction. And while professional athletes do make millions and millions of dollars, the full extent of their sacrifice is not completely acknowledged or compensated. And also, college sports are viewed as a form of reproductive labor since they depend on exploited labor of amateur athletes to support a lucrative business that is dependent on fan following. And for years, these schools would be making millions and millions of dollars from TV deals, sponsorships, other forms of revenue, but that money wouldn't be shared with the players. That would just be going to the schools, and players wouldn't be rewarded for their hard work and their commitment to their schools. And so now I'm going to talk about the role of social institutions in sport, and the first one is family. So to define what a social institution is, it refers to any structure or mechanism of social order and cooperation governing the behavior of a set of individuals within a given community. And so, families serve as a social institution by teaching their children social norms, values, and expectations of society. And ultimately, they're the ones who introduce their children to sports and physical education. They provide emotional support throughout their child's entire sports career and provide transportation as well as educational and economic support, paying their children to participate in these sports leagues. But however, one of the potential downsides of parent involvement in sport is the possibility them putting too much pressure on their children to succeed in their sport, which can lead to stress, anxiety, and ultimately have a negative impact on their performance in their sport. So the next social institution I'll discuss is education. And since kids learn a lot of skills from sports that they also learn in school. For example, kids learn teamwork skills from sport that they also learn in school and that they can use later on in their lives. They also learn how to be disciplined and follow the rules of their sport, which they also learn in the classroom and which is also necessary to be able to do once you enter the workplace. Additionally, they learn social skills and problem-solving skills from sport that they need to know how to do in school and really in any profession they can go to. And then one of the downsides is that education can put a significant amount of pressure on students to perform well, which can cause stress, and anxiety, and negatively affect their mental health. It can also force students to be afraid to fail or make mistakes, even though that is how students learn. Kind of like the same thing with sports. Like their coach could put too much pressure on them to perform, and as a result, they could be scared to make mistakes, even though that's okay and that's how you learn. And so next, I'm going to talk about sport and disability. And so it is known that people with disabilities typically engage significantly less physical activity than people without disabilities. And then some of the reasons for that include the lack of opportunities that are out there for people with disabilities, as well as fear of anxiety and rejection, lack of awareness of the programs that are out there for people with disabilities to play sports, as well as potential high cost to participate in these sports leagues. And there's also the concept of ableism, which refers to discrimination or prejudice against individuals with disabilities. However, one of the films we watched in class was a film called Murderball, which followed the lives of disabled athletes who play a sport known as quad rugby. And this film really showed that people with disabilities can participate in sports, and it challenged the traditional stigmas and stereotypes that they can't. And it showed that these athletes are still able to navigate the challenges they face in life. And really, through the sport of quad rugby, they show that they can be just as tough, aggressive, and hard-nosed as their able-bodied peers, and that they should be given the same opportunity to participate in sport despite their physical limitations, and they should not be denied the benefits of sport and physical activity. And so next, I'm going to talk about sport and gender. And so early on in history, women were not really given equal opportunities in sports. Sports for women really existed in the form of play activities and were more so recreational than competitive. Then the law that changed that was Title IX, which was passed in 1972, and that gave women more equal opportunity in sport. And as a result, participation numbers, college and high school sports among women increased drastically. However, today we do see women participating in sports at the professional level, but however, there are still many challenges that remain. Like the most popular sports leagues in America, like the NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL, which are considered the Big Four, those are all male leagues. And none of the women's leagues are as popular as those. There's also the unequal pay gap between professional male and female athletes, as well as the gap between media coverage and exposure that professional sports for men receive compared to women's professional sports. So lastly, I'm going to talk about the role of sport in resistance and social change. So sports can be used to reflect and influence the culture, values, and identity of society, and it can also challenge and change them. Sports can provide a platform for dialogue, education, and advocacy on various social topics such as human rights, peace, and justice. It can create a sense of solidarity, belonging, and empowerment among groups of people who are marginalized, oppressed, or discriminated against. We've seen a lot of examples of this in professional sports in recent years. There's one of the most infamous ones being Colin Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem in 2016 to protest racial injustice and police brutality against African Americans. Also, one more recent example is during the 2020 NBA season, which had been postponed due to COVID, but then later in the summer, they were able to restart it in a COVID bubble. And then during that, a lot of players kneeled during the national anthem and were wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts in response to deaths of several black people due to police brutality. And since a lot of NBA is black, many of them were very vocal in their calls for social justice. So to conclude, ultimately, I've argued that sports play more of a negative role in society than a positive one. And through the theory of meritocracy, sports takes away the opportunities for children of low-income families to participate in sports and reap the benefits of sport and physical activity. Through social reproduction, professional and collegiate athletes are exploited as they sacrifice their bodies and are not being fully compensated for it. And lastly, sport discriminates against people with disabilities by not providing them equal opportunities to participate in sport, as well as not giving equal compensation and media coverage to women's sports as compared to men's sports. Once again, thank you for listening to my presentation.